So today we're going to be going over the article that we read last night, all of us should have read, Leveraging the Power of Nonverbal Communication. We're going to cover three distinct areas of nonverbal communication. The first one being vocal dynamics, the second being visual thinking, and the third being gestures and facial expressions. So before we get into vocal dynamics, one of the things that they mentioned in the very beginning of the article was thinking of giving a presentation as in terms of a physical performance. So I'm really acting up here. The way that I speak, the way that I move, the way that I look at everybody else here and interact with all of you guys, all this is a performance. It's practice. It's supposed to look good. It's supposed to bring you guys in. So physical performance is a really big deal, is if you can think about it that way. Having an in-the-moment quality when you're speaking is also really important. It gives you more of a natural tone, more of a natural sound. You sound a lot more conversational. And this effect helps people connect more with you. It helps people believe you more. You are really reaching them. Or if you compare it to some prepared remarks, sometimes people can sound a little canned, and you guys can pick up on that immediately. If you guys watch Tom Brady Deflategate, if you watch this press conference, he sounded really stiff. It was obvious that the things that he was saying were maybe a little dishonest. You know that just by listening to him speak. So there's a lot to sounding like you're in the moment. When people first speak, the brain picks up on things immediately. You immediately register the pitch, the inflection, and the tone of whoever's speaking. So pitch is just whether or not you're speaking high or low. My voice is going to sound like this. Victoria's is going to sound a little different, probably higher because she's female. Inflection is kind of the way the pitch changes. Inflection is really prominent when you're thinking of rhetorical questions. The way that the question ends, you know that you're not supposed to respond. It's rhetorical. You can just hear that. They don't have to tell you that. Whereas if you're speaking normally, it's pretty obvious when I ask you a question, I'd like an answer. And then tone is really more like the clarity of your voice. It's the quality of the sound, the way you project, the way that you speak clearly and speak smoothly. And when people listen to these three things, you have a chance immediately of losing your audience by sounding too threatening, too boring, too phony, or too hostile. So you need to be really paying attention to the way that you're speaking so you don't lose out on the audience. Ways to improve your vocal delivery, you can focus on these tools here: emphasis, pitch variety, pacing, and rhythm. So emphasis and inflection have a lot to do with each other. If I tell you that I really want you to listen here, then you guys can hear it. I don't have to tell you that specifically, though I did there. But it really helps send messages to the audience that you don't have to directly say, that I can't really gesture towards. Pitch variety is sounding like you're really into it. Use a lot of energy when you have more variety. You're not sounding too monotonous. Everyone's had a monotonous professor in their academic career, I'm sure. And it's really hard to pay attention because it starts to drone out. It sounds similar. You really lose a lot of your audience when you're too monotonous. Pacing and rhythm have more to do with how fast you're speaking. So if you're speaking too slow, oftentimes you can lose an audience as well, because it's just that the audience is a little bit farther ahead than the speaker is, and you don't want any of that. Whereas if you're speaking too fast, sometimes it may sound like you're not as prepared. You may sound agitated. There are other keys that the audience will clue in on and maybe think, maybe he's not as credible. Maybe the things that he's saying are not as trustworthy. And then the vocal patterns you choose to employ are going to be different based on the scenarios that you're in. If I'm making a sales pitch to somebody, trying to sell somebody a car, just the entire manner of speaking, the way that it sounds, is going to be very different than if you're confronting a boss or a coworker, like some of you may have done in the past few weeks, or if you're offering comfort or support to a friend. The way that you choose your vocal patterns really lend credence to the things that you're saying. So there are plenty of other scenarios that you guys, I'm sure, can think of. But I'm going to pass over to Alfredo here to talk about visual thinking.
Thanks, Anthony. And my name is Alfredo, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about visual thinking. This is defined as how you communicate yourself to the audience, what they're picking up when you're speaking. The thing that makes public speaking really, really tough is that you're up here, you're on stage, and you're communicating. And the entire time you're doing that, the audience is judging you. That's the tough part. They're picking up on your nonverbal clues. They're trying to decide if they believe you, if they like you, or even if they even trust you. And that's the challenge. So how can we better accomplish this? Okay, the article says you have to own your territory. That sounds kind of funny, but what it means is you want to be confident and you want to be expansive. You want to make use of all of your space. A really great tool to do this is the triangle. There are two different triangles. If you have a really big space, a really big stage, you can engage the audience on one side. As you transition into your speech, you can move. You can incorporate this side. The front row is the front row. They're always going to be engaged, but you want to also reach the back. And then when you're concluding, you can come back to the center. If you don't have a lot of space, if you might have a podium, then you can still use your body. You can direct your shoulders to one side, again to the left, and then bring it back to the center. Okay, so that's how we do it. Those are good things to do. What not to do. Physical expressions to avoid. When you're taking questions, you don't want to be rude. You want to be polite. You want to receive the question and then give the answer. You don't want to nod and try to rush. You want to stay big. You want to stand up nice and tall. You want to be confident and direct. You don't want to be hunched over. And you want to have good movements, but you don't want them to be too big. This communicates to the audience that you're not in control and they don't have to trust your message. The best example I can give of a really great performance or speech would be a TED Talk. I am in awe of people who can do a TED Talk. It is an enormous stage. It is a really big audience. And all you have is yourself, your personality to fill up that space, and it's a lot of space to own. So people who do TED Talks, they're my personal heroes. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nick, and we're going to continue on with gestures.
All right, thank you. All right, so we've all had presentations, or we've all done presentations where you go to do it, and then all of a sudden you're just kind of hunched over talking to yourself pretty much. That's because a lot of the gestures we make during a presentation are going to be subconscious. We're not really going to be able to add it in after the fact as well. And that's because our body tries to amplify our message when we're talking, even if we don't really mean to. Like for me personally, when I talk, I generally use my hands a lot. It's more that gesture more often, kind of like I'm giving information to you guys. Anthony, he does something like this with one hand, something similar. But you really do have to be careful when you're presenting, because if you focus too much on one gesture, then you're going to lose, you're not going to be able to make the presentation what it could be if you were using all sorts of different types. And similar to what Alfredo was talking about with using the whole space, you have to use your entire body during the presentation. So on top of moving around, you need to be able to use your arms and limbs and face to really sell that presentation. So if I'm doing something like this, it's really only directed toward this center part of the room. But if I'm opening up my arms, if I'm making a bigger gesture, that opens it up to the entire audience, and that connects with everybody. Another good way to do it is when you want to make a point or when you want to convey something important to them, you lean towards them. That's going to convey a sense of trust and a sense of connection. It's also going to give you a little bit of credibility. And you don't really have to master physical expressions and gestures. Nobody expects you to be a mime and be perfect at it. It takes a lot of practice. Like the TED speakers, they have hours and hours and hours of practice that we as students haven't had the time to have. And facial expressions, so they're a little bit tricky because they're often the hardest to control, especially when speaking, but they generally convey the most. So if I have my face like this and I look dull and sullen, you guys aren't going to have a good time with the presentation, and neither am I. You really have to kind of make your facial expressions show what you want to sell. And another way to help with that is eye contact. So if you make eye contact with your audience, you're going to connect with them and you're going to have a deeper connection with them. So we hope you guys have been paying attention. Here's the quiz.
Would one of you read the quiz questions?
So number one, when thinking about nonverbal communication, one should think about giving a presentation in terms of a blank. Two, using the blank is an effective method to own your territory. Three, lean blank the audience at blank moments. Name 3 areas of nonverbal communication that we covered, and give one example of each. And what are 2 physical expressions to avoid and why?
Thank you.